Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. As always, Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and I want to use this episode of the podcast, which is episode 12, season 8, to wrap up on the Good Structure is Good Bonsai. It's been actually really beneficial and cathartic and good for the soul for me to look back and talk about this sort of stuff again. I've enjoyed it. It's like I said before, it's the sort of thing that I follow throughout all of my bonsai practices. It's stuff that I talk about on a very regular basis with a lot of people that have probably heard me say the same thing over and over and over and over again. But it's sort of the core of what I work towards with my bonsai. And with any bonsai that I come across, I always think, is there a better way that this structure can be improved? Because that frame is so important to tell the tale and longevity of the design, and just my complete, or whoever's tree it is, their complete satisfaction with looking at that tree, knowing that it's the very best that it possibly can be. So with that said, I want to start the podcast this week by talking about, is it ever okay to not follow the guideline of it's good structure is good bonsai? Yes, it is. It's fine. So while it is the absolute backbone of my bonsai life, it's okay to not always follow it. And these guidelines, these rules, if you believe in the rules, which I don't, if you do believe in real rules for bonsai, then they're there to be flexed and broken and pushed to their limits, because that's what it's about. That's what makes interesting. That's what's creative. That's all that stuff, But there is purpose for these guidelines that can be a fallback point. But anyway, so I want to talk about that in the podcast, and also as we're heading into starting the second month now of the autumn or fall period, it's time to talk a bit about watering. You should be fertilising. It's time for the second round of tea bags to get out there on the trees. That's a nice little prompt. But I want to also talk in this podcast about autumn watering, because it's really hard. It's very, very difficult. And I'm sure about right now, things are starting to feel maybe a little bit more awkward around the yard. And there's reason for it. As we come out of, summer's petered off and we're heading towards the winter period, but we're somewhere in limbo in between the two, and that has an impact on our bonsai. So I want to talk about that in the podcast as well. So it should be interesting to wrap up and then start on something new, which is very practical around the yard. So let's get into it. All right, good structure is good bonsai. You should know that. It should be part of your psyche. It should be part of your bonsai world. Is it ever okay to break those structural guidelines? Is it okay to not have good structure in your bonsai? Yes. Yeah, it is. Definitely. I as I said last episode, I definitely don't want this to be seen as me standing on an ivory tower dictating that this is the way of bonsai. Definitely not. 100%. That's not the case at all. I'm just trying to provide some kind of framework to allow people to build structure and focus on the structure of their bonsai as I have. But is it okay to not have perfect structure in your bonsai? Definitely. Is there a downside to not having perfect structure? Yes, there is. And that's the impact, I suppose, that you've got to be aware of and understand when you make these compromises. And I'll call it a compromise because I think my approach to this not focusing on not having good structure, it would be a short-term thing for me. And I can tell you from experience, I'll just use an example of a tree that had a bar branch. A beautiful pine, lovely, really nice tree. Really, really loved it. Like it's a one of these near and dear trees to me that I don't really show anybody. It's just for me. And when I first started working on it a long time ago, it had bar branches. The bottom left and bottom right branches barred. And did I know it was going to be a problem? Yep, sure did. Did I do something about it? No, I didn't, because the tree looked beautiful. Like it looked really, really nice. It's styled and wide and shaped and decandled and fertilised and pruned and plucked and repotted and did that year on year on year. And as I refined who I am in my world of bonsai, and I suddenly started to get to a point where I wanted more. Like I wanted a higher level of what I deem as perfection in my bonsai world. Then I looked at it, and every time I looked at this tree, I became a little sadder, a little disenfranchised with it. Every time I looked at it, I went, that's a compromise. That's something that, I know I shouldn't have bar branches. I know it is starting to get swelling. It's starting to get a bit of knuckling happening in that area because they were key branches. So it's, it's happening a lot. There's a lot of foliage on each of those branches. And I kept looking at it, and every time I would get a little bit more disappointed in myself for not having the courage all those years ago to have made the decision. When I first got the tree, first put it on the bench, first started working on it, and what I should have done was just go, that's it, that's wrong. I can tell that's wrong. It stands out like the proverbial dogs. It was something that should have been sorted out a long time ago, but I didn't because my focus was that word silhouette and the fullness of the design, and that was okay. It definitely was okay. But as time went on, more and more time passed by, it got harder to cut it off because that branch kept developing. The 1 to 2 guideline, 10 branches, 10 tufts of foliage turned into 20. Then that turned into 40. And suddenly I've got this massive, significant pad, with multiple branches coming off it that looked really, really nice. But the area of problem, the swelling, that visibility of that direct, horizontal, or, they weren't horizontal, but those branches directly opposite each other really started to stand out more and more and more as those branches became thicker and more significant. And then one day, like it was a long time after I'd started this tree and after a lot of years of being disappointed with the design because it wasn't meeting my criteria, my expectations. And this is me. This is not someone else walking in my yard saying, "Hey, you should do this," and that's terrible. You get a negative score on your bonsai scorecard. Doesn't work that way. But for me, I felt it. So one day I sat there with the branch cutters. I put them on the branch, and I sat there for what seemed like an eternity, and eventually cut it off. It is a really formal upright tree. I've done it before. I've talked about it with other trees where I've done this, but this one was a very formal upright tree. Cut the branch off eventually, like after sweat beating on my brow and running down the side of my face and my hands shaking nervously. I'm sitting there looking at it. It wasn't that quite that dramatic, but it was a big moment. And then I put the branch cutters in, cut it off. And once it was gone, it was like I felt a huge sigh of relief. Like it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulder. And I looked at the tree and go, well, yep, sure, the structure has changed significantly. Like there's a massive branch now that's on the floor in the workshop. But do I feel better? Yeah, I do. I do feel much better. And then I set my mind on that next stage of development of the tree. And, I'm not going to tell you that I chucked on 2 pieces of wire and the tree looked perfect because it's not the way it worked. But it had taken a significant step backwards. But then I developed the plan to say, well, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to build the structure on this tree and rebuild a far superior bonsai in my mind that, it's not going to be 10 minutes after I cut the branch off and go, hey, look at this. It's a showpiece. It doesn't work that way. It was a setback, but it allowed me to go past that tree, suddenly get excited again and suddenly go, this is what bonsai is for me. This is that little spring in my step that I get, that smile when I'm standing there with my coffee in front of it and go, you know what, it's going to be a much better tree. And I look at the scar on that tree to this day. It's rolled over, almost completely gone now, but I can see there's a bit of swelling on the trunk where the 2 branches were. That'll be there forever. I'm not going to look at doing anything about that, but it just reminds me that you can break these or flex on these structural guidelines, and some you'll incorporate into the design forever, and you'll go, well, that's just the way it is. That's what I'm going to have. And other times, you'll look at it and go, well, okay, so for me to be able to take that off, or to fix that poor piece of structure that worries me, I need this to happen and develop. And it might be that there's a little bud just above where you're going to cut the branch off, and you look at it and go, okay, well, I'm going to give that little bud 2 years to grow and get more significant, get some structure on there, then I'm going to remove that branch because I still want to look at a nice silhouette of a tree. You might not be prepared to take that significant step backwards to take the step forward. You can always work the two in conjunction, but understand that delay, that compromise can have an impact on another part of the tree somewhere else. Something might get too thick. Something else might get too coarse. There could be too many resources. Not enough resources go to an area because the tree's feeding it through its limited root system that it's got in the pot. It's feeding a pretty significant area of the tree that is going to get cut off. Is it better longer term to cut that off now and have those resources go to that little bud so that in 2 years' time it's a fully developed branch, or is it better to just have it get a micro feed, slowly start kicking along, and then 2 years down the track, then you start building the structure? And these, as I say a lot of times to people that come into the workshop, these are you problems. These are, you can seek advice, you can reach out to people like me that will, gladly give you an opinion, but when it comes time to putting the branch cutter onto the tree, that's got to be you. You've got to make that decision, and it can't be transferred. It can't be shuffled down the line. It's got to be your decision. I do follow this this approach, which you don't have to. It's your tree, your branch cutter, your decision. But for me, I look at it and think the quicker it's corrected, the faster I can achieve my structural plan. So good structure is good bonsai is fundamental to what I do, and not having that and having some kind of a compromise or a delay, it just means that I'm further down the track, and that further down the track could be 1 season, it could be 2 seasons, it could be 1 year, it could be 2 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 15 years, whatever it is. It just means that I'm delaying the inevitable. I'm holding off now something that if I do it now, I'm on the path a lot faster. Whereas if I don't, it sort of delays what's going to be happening for me further down the track. And you, more often than not, you'll find that the failure in good structure. It's not failure, but and I don't want to keep using the word compromise, but poor structural choices are often made to fill holes in your bonsai design. And that could be just while you're waiting for a bud to grow, but it's often that you'll look at it and go, actually, I've got nothing in that area of the tree. There's nothing growing up that side of the trunk, and I need a branch there. So I've got this back branch. I'm going to push it around into that area. So when I look at it from the front, it's going to have a nice full silhouette. There's that word, full looking tree. So you make that compromise because you've got nothing there. And hey, look, that's okay. But then what's the next step that you're going to take that will allow you to improve the structure? Is it, you can pray for buds to appear to the bonsai gods and say, hey, listen, a bud here would be brilliant. Sometimes it happens. Face your tree to the north, make your sacrifices and water and fertilize as you should, and maybe, who knows, maybe you might get a bud there. Other times it will be things like a thread graft or an approach graft or something to say, I need a branch here. All right, I'm going to grow this branch from here, then I'm going to curl it around and I'm going to thread it through the trunk so it comes out exactly where I want it. Great idea. Fantastic. And then once that thread graft's done somewhere, in the future, in the next 3, 6, 12 months, whatever it is, then let that take for another, 1, 2, 3, 5 months, whatever it is, however long it takes. Then as that starts to grow and starts to form the branch that you want, then the back branch that you've got that you've made the compromise with by bending around into the silhouette of the tree, then you can look at removing that. So you can have these compromises, but it's more important. It's vital to have a plan to correct it. And it doesn't need to be something that you're going to do straight away. It can be something for years and years down the track. But that whole plan get to use the plan word again in the podcast, which is nice. But that whole plan to improve it is something that should be on the agenda. Definitely, it should be something that you're going to say, "Hey, I'm not going to tolerate these sort of, imperfections in your bonsai styling life." Well, this is how I approach it anyway, and because I always want to push for it. You might look at it and go, "Hey, I'm more than happy with that branch coming from the back and curling around there. I'm going to live with it forever. I don't care what Scott says. Perfect, great. As long as you get out and spend time with your bonsai and they make you happy, my mission is achieved." But when I think about and I look at a good structure is good bonsai, and I look at the framework and everything to do with trees, those sort of things, I would always say, yeah, okay, but it's okay for now. Yep, I can see exactly what you've done, but what's the plan? What's the process that you're going to take to fix that or improve it? And it might be that the imperfection in the structure is the whole tree. It might be exactly what you want. You want to draw people in to look at it. You want to create that interest by saying, "Hey, look at that. That branch actually originates from here. It curls around like an ice cream cone, and then comes out and pops out over here." Great. If that's your intent, I have zero issues with it, and I'm on board. I'm down with that. I love it. But if you're talking about good structure is good bonsai, which is what these podcasts have been about, then you've always got to have that plan, I believe, to continually improve your structure to the point that you go, this is what I deem to be my bonsai structural perfection. I have to, with this podcast, constantly pull myself up because it's hard to stop talking about bonsai. I really find it, sometimes I need to almost set a stopwatch to say, just shut up. Stop rabbiting on about bonsai. But I love it. And I'm passionate to the core about it. And, I find that this good structure is good bonsai. It's a bonsai life philosophy that I work with day in, day out. And if you're ever in doubt when you're working on a tree or any of your bonsai, and you suddenly get to the point where you go, I'm just lost. I don't know what to do. I'm unsure. I'm uncertain. I really need someone else to do this for me. I wish I had someone here to ask me. Then fall back on the basics of good structure is good bonsai. All right, look at it. Simple things like no more than two things originating from any one spot. So trunk and one branch. If you look at any kind of areas of the tree, and you go, well, there's this. I'm not sure. There's 15 things there. Well, it's got to come back to two. Just start working towards that. You might not get to two. You might get to 3 or 4. But 3 or 4 is far better than 15. So don't be super hard on yourself and go, oh well, I heard good structures, good bonsai. 2 things. I've got bar branches. I've got to cut one off. Scott told this story about a tree that he looked at for ages, and he was only happy once he cut it off. I don't know what to do. It doesn't need to be done now. Start developing a plan for it. Start thinking about it and start getting your head around it. You don't need to be. Some people can jump into it and go, yep, bang, 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 done, cut, move on. Other people, it's like, I love this tree. Yeah, and I'm not saying the people that jump into it don't love their tree, but their approach is more, I can't do that to the tree. Like, I've looked at this tree for so long and I know it's wrong. I know something's not right about it, but I'm just going to live with it. And maybe that's the way it is. Maybe you live with the compromise. No problem. You're not fazed by it having knuckles. You're not, you might not want that complete perfection in your life. But for me, it's very important because bonsai is all about the fine detail. It's all about the little things. It's the 1%ers. It's all the small things that we do with our trees that make such a big difference in the long term. Getting out there and making sure your fertilizer's on the tree, it's fresh, that that it's working, that it's doing its job, making sure that the trees get the water when they need the water, spraying your trees or pest management, looking at fungal issues, making sure things like the bud conveyor, you get in there and you open things up, not to get buds to grow, not for now, but for maybe 1, 2, 3, 5 years down the track. You're doing things now for your tree for in the future. And when you don't, the downside to it is that that lack of planning and that lack of thought about the future, what's going to happen with the tree. You might not see the impact of it immediately, but somewhere down the track you will, and that's part of the bonsai evolution, bonsai life. And if you've been listening to this podcast for the last 8 years, and you've been not binge listening, but you've been listening for 8 years, then you'll have been through what I'm talking about, because you will have started your bonsai life, let's say 8 years ago, and you would have heard nothing about, and I didn't talk about the bud conveyor. We talked about structural stuff, but you may have had big, thick pads, and then, 5 years into season 5, you're looking at your pads going, now they're just too long. I've got to cut these back, but I've got nothing viable on the inside. So now when, 8 years down the track, you hear things like the bud conveyor, you go, yeah, I know exactly what that is. I live for the bud conveyor, because it provides me the opportunity to continually work my trees, but maintain my silhouette. So by working with this plan for structural perfection, or good structure with your bonsai, then you'll make sure that these things remain first and foremost into your mind. And having not, I don't like the word rules, but having some kind of a guide behind you when you do get lost, when you look at a shrub and you're starting something, or you're beginning something, just look at it and just fall back to the basics. If you don't know what to do, just fall back to the basics. Okay, what would Scott do? What does good structure mean in this tree? All right, so I've got to thin it out a little bit. All right, so I'm going to start looking at all the junctions. I'm going to, start clearing the underneath growth. I'm going to start coming back to 2 at any point. I don't want stuff, growing, straight up, but I want to keep stuff slightly on the angle. You have this range of parameters that you can start working with, and all of a sudden you're eliminating things. And then you're getting closer and closer and closer to what is the best on that tree at that point in time. Can it be better? Yep, sure. Can we wire it? Can we shape it? Can we do this? Yep, yeah, we can do all that sort of stuff in the future. But through the elimination process, by keeping this framework of good structure is good bonsai behind you, like as a support, like a couch, a comfortable couch that you sit in to watch the TV, you have that wrapped around you saying, yeah, good structure is good bonsai, good structure is good bonsai. You can take steps forward to start working through things to get to that end point yourself, and there might be a few flip a coin decisions. There might be a few areas that you might go, I really want a second opinion on this. Perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can really start to build your own bonsai confidence by working through these different areas. I always think that if you can bend the rules, bend something hard and fast to say, you know what, I know it's meant to be left, right, back, whatever, but I'm going to do this, you'll make a far more interesting bonsai. Definitely will. You can still have structural integrity, good structure on your bonsai by bending the rules or breaking the rules. Definitely. I think that your horticultural principles are the only priority that we all have to follow. What looks good, it might be impossible to maintain long term. Having a tree that's growing upside down, hanging from a chandelier, might look brilliant for a display, but how does that tree survive long term? How do you get that tree to live and to do what it's got to do as a tree if it's in that kind of environment? And you need to think about it. Just being artistic for the sake of being artistic without 100% having that horticultural reference behind you is probably the biggest mistake that you'll ever make. and seeing a picture of something and going, hey, I'm going to do that because that looks brilliant. Okay, great. How's the tree going to be a tree in that environment? How's that going to happen? Ask yourself the simple question: how is that tree going to survive long term? There's got to be something to it. You can't have the impossible and suddenly, have it live like that for the next 1,000 years. It's just not going to happen. I promise you. And if you're making compromises with your structural integrity, by shading and all the rest of it, then you'll pay the price. Maybe not now, and it'll look great for your Insta pics. That'll look brilliant, but longer term, it's going to be something that you're going to look at and go, well, now that branch is starting to get weak, or it's got a hell of a lot of pests on it. It's not growing like it should be growing. What's wrong with this? What's wrong with that? It's, maybe those things should have been thought of earlier than later. I think something that looks good from afar can often be far from good up close. The compromises that get made to fill the silhouette and not focusing on structural integrity of the design, there's a cost. There's a cost to it. And as long as you're aware of it, go for it. I'm not the bonsai police. I don't want to be. I want to see different. I want to see inventive. I want to see the rules flexed and bent and broken, because they're the ones that you stop and look at. You see something different, go, wow, look at that. That's brilliant. But you've got to keep the overall foundation of structural integrity and horticultural principles, all the stuff that makes bonsai tick. You've got to keep that first and foremost in your mind whenever you're working with your trees. All right, so to wrap up the podcast, I want to talk about autumn watering. As I said, we're sort of starting. We finished the first part of autumn, which was let's call it a tale of summer. Things are starting to cool down, or they should. In southern states, where I'm in Melbourne, in Victoria, they're definitely cooled down. Daylight hours are getting shorter for all of us, but you're finding that sometimes there's warmer days, but the daylight hours themselves are really the driver at the moment for the trees. Everything's sort of starting to get pulled back in. Fertilising becomes super important for the strength of the tree, which we've talked about before, but watering can be an absolute nightmare. Like it can be tough. And I get it, I feel it, because all the trees are going into or heading towards dormancy at different times. Some may be still growing. You might find that trees like, evergreens may still be having a little bit of growth there, still be taking up water at different rates. Other trees, you look through, your deciduous. Some may have lost leaves completely. Some may have nice colour. Some may still be a bit green. You can have a mixed bag in 20 trees. You can have a mixed bag of trees being at different points. And I find that for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people, autumn watering is the toughest of the lot, because spring overwater, no problem. You're heading towards a warmer period. Trees are sucking it up because they're starting to grow. Daylight hours are getting longer. They're loving it. Summer, plough the water on there, no problems. It's hot, it's windy, it's whatever. Trees are going to love it. Winter, we know that they're dormant, so we cut back the watering naturally because it's colder, it's wetter, it's more miserable outside. So things start to slow down. Autumn's tough because we're getting still that tail of summer. We get the start of winter where we're getting hot days, cold days, shorter days. They're getting cold nights. We get warm winds. We get everything come through in autumn, and the tree may not be taking up water, but the pot's dried out because it's a warm, windy day. What do? Do you plough water on there 3 times a day to keep the soil wet, or do you hold back a little bit? What's your approach? And it's unique. It's individual for every single tree. And using things like a moisture meter to get to know the trees a bit better can really help. Soil on the surface may be dry. Down further in the pot, it might be still wet. So constantly watering without knowing what's happening inside that root mass can be a negative thing as well. As they head towards dormancy and start going to sleep, taking up a lot less water, you don't want the roots getting bone dry. But if they're constantly going to stay wet, then you'll start getting root rot, which means the roots are going to start dying back. You're gonna have all sorts of issues with it. So just be very careful. I know it's tough. I feel it. I see it as the hardest part of the year. Just be really mindful that you've got to peter that the watering off. Less is going to start becoming the norm for things, and it's going to become individual for the trees. Your pines, you're fertilizing your pines now as you're heading in towards the dormancy period. You really want to build that up. So you've got to get water onto those tea bags to be fertilizing them as well. So there's all these compromises that we're going to be making with the watering. Just be careful with it. Don't overdo it and don't underdo it. There's that delicate balance, which is where sometimes, hopefully you're not going to learn the hard way, but that's what you go through, and that's why I talk about it on the podcast, because I've learnt the hard way where you sort of go, well, no, it's nothing needs water, so you don't water, and then suddenly you're getting dieback and trees start prematurely dropping their leaves. It's like, let it dry out too much. Other times you go too far and you're putting more water. You get all this slimy goop starting to build up on top of the pots. You got moss everywhere going up the trunks. You've got a tree which its root system is starting to stink. It's starting to rot because there's just too much water on there. So you've got to get that. You've got to get that delicate balance somewhere with your watering, so you can make sure the tree gets what they need when they need it. Moisture meter is a great idea. Don't just go by sticking your finger on the soil, because sometimes that's not right. Getting a little bit deeper in with a probe into the soil can really help. Anyway, enough said about that. Enjoy autumn. It's a beautiful time. The deciduous start looking great. Don't forget that your natives most likely will still be growing no matter what, as they always do. They just seem to grow every single day of the year. It's, for all the different varieties. Slow down a little bit at this time, but yeah, they are very exciting. Thanks for listening in. Thanks to subscribers. Thanks for being part of the podcast. I love it that I look at the stats on this podcast and the reach, and it's far and wide. It's all around the globe, and lots of people seem to enjoy it, which is lovely. So thank you for all the positive feedback, and thanks for staying in touch. Until next time, as always, give your trees a cuddle for me too. Don't forget, it's a nice time that they need a bit of love. And until next time, happy bonsai.